Alright, what's going on everybody? Welcome back to another video here on the channel, and today we're going to be talking about the whole Joe Rogan Spotify situation. I'm sure that you've probably heard at least something about this. It's been kind of an ongoing controversy for a long time now, really. And it seems like it's only kind of gotten worse and snowballed even more as time has gone on and people have found more things to kind of bring into the situation against Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan is obviously the mastermind and the host behind the most popular podcast in the world, the Joe Rogan Experience, which experiences about 11 million daily listeners, and actually was so massive that it garnered a $100 million contract to become exclusive to the Spotify platform. Joe Rogan has been controversial for a while now, but it seems like he's becoming even more controversial as time goes on. Especially recently, there's been a lot of, people debating about his COVID-19 stances, whether or not he's spreading misinformation on his show. There was a compilation that was going around online, a video compilation that also showed Joe Rogan saying the hard ER multiple times, like actually dozens of times. And he's also caught flack for some other comments that were deemed racist, including one where I believe he said something like going to the city of Philadelphia was like entering Planet of the Apes. Considering the city of Philadelphia is like 44% African Americans, I think you can kind of understand where people drew the line between what he was saying and what he was apparently saying, you know what I mean? And there's been a lot of calls for him to be shut down in some way, right? There's been people calling for him to be outright booted off of Spotify and realistically booted off of pretty much all of the massive platforms like iTunes, Spotify, YouTube. There's been people calling for him to basically be canceled. People don't like his show because of these things. He's known for interviewing controversial guests and people with a lot of differing opinions and political ideals, especially recently, like he did, it was like a 4-hour episode with Jordan Peterson, who is extremely controversial for a lot of the things that he says. And it seems like a lot of celebrities even are kind of jumping on board with the entire thing against Joe Rogan, calling for him to be somewhat censored. And even it got to the point where the US Surgeon General said that Spotify should do something about Joe Rogan. Now, I kind of wanted to find a little bit of middle ground in this situation because honestly, I think that's where really the truth of a lot of this lies. I am a fan of Joe Rogan overall. I like his stand-up comedy. I watch the Joe Rogan Experience from time to time. It really depends on who's on the show, like I said, in previous times that I've talked about the show. I have watched episodes where he, say, interviews somebody that I constantly disagree with or don't find myself particularly caring for. And even Joe himself, I find myself disagreeing with pretty often. I don't disagree with everything he says, but there are some of those moments on his show that things are said and I kind of have to do like a double take. I'm like, what the fuck did he actually just say? Or what did his guest just say? I feel like that's really more or less just part of actually consuming people's content. I would assume the vast majority of you probably disagree with me even at times, right? There's going to be times where you disagree with people that you watch. At least you should. I think personally it's healthy to consume content at a point where, you're not just listening to people basically mulching over the same things that you believe on repeat. I feel like that's how you create an echo chamber and you kind of more or less detach yourself from reality a little bit. Only listening to like one perspective on a lot of things doesn't really do anything to teach you anything. It doesn't really do anything to keep you up to date and informed on what's actually going on. It's just not really good in my opinion, right? So I do go out of my way, even with like Jordan Peterson. I watched the recent episode because people were making a massive fuss about it, and as someone who has heard a lot of what Jordan Peterson's had to say in the past, agreed with some of it and disagreed with some of it, I wanted to see what he said that was so controversial. And throughout the episode, I found myself disagreeing with him a lot on a lot of different things, but I kind of just wanted to talk about this whole controversy in general. I'm sorry for stumbling over that, but there's a couple different things really to talk about with this entire thing, right? First off, I kind of want to talk about like the overall movement starting with like the COVID-19 misinformation and whatnot. That people have called for him to be canceled. So you've had so many people come over the last, few months or whatever and say that he deserves to have his show shut down because, he's willfully spreading misinformation and leading people to, doubt vaccines for COVID-19 and doubt treatment. I believe even Joe Rogan himself has claimed that he used like ivermectin and other non-approved medication to treat COVID when he got it. And he like lives on elk meat and a bunch of other stuff, right? He said things like that, or at least in insinuated things like that, or he's had guests on his show that supposedly spread misinformation like this. And people call for him to be banned because they say, you know, he's teaching people to, you know, basically not believe in science. He's teaching people to not believe what these people are saying. My personal opinion on this, honestly, I don't know if this is a hot take or controversial, but I personally have the ability to differentiate between information that I agree with and that I disagree with, right? I feel like people who are saying that he should be canceled, right? They more or less, they kind of define pretty much everyone who watches his show as like only agreeing with him. And they take the stance that like everything Joe Rogan says is like gospel to his audience. Sure, there's probably a subcategory of people in his audience that will listen to anything that he says, but I think that most sensible people will say that they don't get their personal medical information from a podcast, right? Like, I would not expect for you guys to come to my YouTube channel in order to get legitimate health information, considering the fact that I'm not a doctor. I have no medical history, background, training, not enough knowledge to consider myself an expert in the field whatsoever. And I kind of apply that mentality to pretty much anyone's media that I consume, right? Joe Rogan is very clearly not an expert on like 90% of the shit that they talk about on the show. So for me personally, his personal opinion on what he thinks on vaccines and what he thinks on his elk meat diet or whatever, I don't let that shit apply to me because I don't need Joe Rogan to do the thinking for me. I don't need him to tell me what I need to be doing in my personal life, right? Oh, you don't need to get that shot, man. My personal choice is I'm going to believe the science and the doctors behind this entire thing. I know that for some reason it's become controversial to have an opinion on vaccines, but me personally, I am not anti-vax. I do support voluntary vaccination. I do not think that anyone should be literally forced to take a vaccine that they don't want, but I believe that you should have the right to choose science, and people should not judge you for that. And a lot of people over this specific issue have kind of called for Joe Rogan's show to be brought to an end. But for me personally, I don't really see that as necessary because I feel like you should be able to differentiate between these things, right? You should be able to listen to someone you like and disagree with them. If Joe Rogan told me to jump off a bridge tomorrow, that's not going to happen. You know, maybe some people do, but for me personally, that's not going to happen. And I'm not going to speak for everyone else because it's not really my place to speak for anyone else, right? If Joe Rogan or anyone on his show says something I disagree with, I'm perfectly fine with my brain being capable to kind of split those things apart. And even recently, the main controversy now is more or less about his usage of the N-word with the hard R and some of the comments that he's made that have been deemed racist in the past. Now, in order to be fair, a lot of the clips that were put inside of this massive compilation were completely taken out of context. Joe Rogan, if you just watch the video, and obviously I can't play the video because it's quite literally just a big massive video of him saying racial slurs on repeat, but the context behind a lot of those clips is missing, so if you were to just watch that completely, you know, blind to the situation or whatnot, you could easily be led to think that he's just on his show dropping the hard R left and right, being hateful and being a piece of shit, and just saying it with no repercussions and no problem, just actually saying it in a hateful manner. In a pretty good amount of these clips, if not literally all of these clips, because I actually do remember a very few couple of these clips that were from episodes I've seen. More or less, he was saying it contextually to like quote someone else, right? So I guess somebody else would say something that included the slur, and he would simply just be re-quoting what they said or restating what they said verbatim in order to like actually display what message that they said. And of course, you know, they don't clip the full sentence of what he's saying or what he's talking about beforehand. They were simply just clipping him saying the word and throwing the entire thing together, right? And I feel like that's a little bit of an unfair portrayal. I understand the perspective of some of the things that he had said, like especially the Philadelphia comment. I can understand where people would deem that to be racially insensitive and fucked up to say. But to be fair, a lot of context was missing from a lot of those clips. And I don't think that that's entirely fair because it makes it look 1,000,000 times worse than it actually was. And unfortunately, you know, a lot of the debate wasn't around the actual quotes that he said that could be deemed flat out racist. Like 90 to 95% of all of the chatter, I guess, that I've seen about this whole situation here has primarily been basically people just mad about the out of context quotes. And of course, a lot of people started speaking out around this time, right? This is, of course, I've noticed that nobody in the celebrity world, like in Hollywood, no musicians, they weren't really all speaking out against Joe Rogan until it was kind of just popular to do it. Like these celebrities now all of a sudden are like, for instance, we're going to take a look at Don Winslow, who is a New York Times best-selling author, a verified user of Twitter, and apparently acquaintances with The Rock on Twitter now. He had a lot to say about this, so let's take a look. Dear at The Rock, you're a hero to many people in using your platform to defend Joe Rogan, a guy that used and laughed about using the N-word dozens of times is a terrible use of your power. Have you actually listened to this man's many racist statements about black people? So this actually evoked a response from The Rock, and they had a little bit of a back and forth. The Rock kind of, I guess, fell and caved into this and, said that he learned what happened and whatnot. So Don here, he really cares, right? He's really against usage of this slur because it's been used dozens of times by Joe Rogan, and, it's wrong for Joe Rogan to do that. His many racist statements about black people have shown through. But what if I told you that, conveniently enough, Don Winslow has actually written the word not only dozens of times, but across at least 15 of his books? In fact, a Twitter user came out with a thread basically exposing Don Winslow for being a complete hypocrite in this situation because, he's calling out other people for supporting Joe Rogan because Joe Rogan said the N-word. But there's literally an entire thread that shows excerpts of these 15 books, right? And he has repeatedly used these words, okay? He's repeatedly written these in his books with no censorship, no problem whatsoever. In fact, he hasn't only written the N-word, but he's written other slurs targeted at other minorities, including the S-word, which is a slur for Hispanic people. And you can straight up see it in his writing, right? So it's okay for him to call out Joe Rogan for, out of context usage of the hard R in which he's quoting someone else, but this guy is just fucking, carpet bombed the N-word throughout all of his writings, right? Throughout over a dozen books of his. Now, people came to Don's defense about this, and they said that there was a massive difference between, Joe Rogan's situation and his, and that key difference is that, well, Joe Rogan is a podcast host, and Don here is an author. He's writing books, and he's basically putting these in fictional stories, and it's not actually real usage of the word, you know what I mean? He's just kind of writing it as part of his book, as part of these characters and stuff like that, right? But I feel like if it's wrong for Joe Rogan to be saying this in the contextual manner that he did, and he's in the wrong because he was saying it to quote what other people were saying verbatim, then why is it okay for the people calling him out who aren't, understanding that context matters in that situation? Why is it okay for them to say it? And not only just say it once or twice, but write it over 15 books dozens of times. So it seems like there's a little bit of a double standard, and Don, he didn't, I don't think, expect for people to call him out on that point because, well, you got to go through all of that writing and everything, and I don't think he really saw anyone coming forward with that and talking about it in any way, shape, or form, but I find it pretty ironic that he is the person who is trying to speak up on behalf of all of this, right? And actually, Don himself, who, is trying to cancel Joe Rogan, actually has espoused multiple other beliefs that have now gotten Joe Rogan in trouble. So you may know that, of course, Joe Rogan is in a lot of trouble for supposedly spreading COVID-19 misinformation, telling people not to get vaccinated or that they don't need to get vaccinated is what I've heard. But Don Winslow here, he's a pretty fucking mainstream hypocrite, okay? So not only did he get caught with the books in 4K, but he got caught with this one here. I've been saying this shit for months. No surprise here. If you take Donald Trump's rushed vaccine, you're an idiot. October 12th, 2020. Dear Aaron Rodgers, I think the 49ers beat you tonight because they were #vaxxed and masked. Just one man's opinion. P.S. It also might be because you're a prick. So what Don is doing here is he's virtue signaling, okay? And this isn't to defend what Joe Rogan's saying here, but it's to call out the massive hypocrisy in the people who are suddenly enraged by what Joe Rogan has been saying for years. The people who did not give a shit whatsoever before suddenly upset about this. And Don is simply joining in on the fact that these people are upset on Twitter simply so that he can get fucking brownie points for being a good guy. You know what I mean? Don has the correct opinion, everybody. He has the verified Twitter factual opinion of the day. He has also shared it himself, so please go buy his books. Please give him a follow on Twitter. He has that verified check mark. You know, he really needs it, guys. He needs you guys to just believe that he's a good guy. Please believe him. He's not one of the bad guys. So back in late 2020, when we were 8 months or so deep into this global pandemic, you were an idiot if you were taking Donald Trump's rushed vaccine, because Donald Trump has apparently proprietorial ownership over the vaccine simply because he was president and the majority of Americans didn't like him at the time, right? So you were an idiot if you took that vaccine. But then, of course, you know, now that the opinion, popular at least, is that you should be vaccinated and you should believe the scientists and the doctors on COVID-19. And now that Trump is no longer in office, and, you know, he can try to equate the vaccine to Biden's push, or at least a politician that he more or less agrees with, all of a sudden now he has no problem with it, you know? Apparently Aaron Rodgers is getting beat by the 49ers because they were hashtag vaxxed and masked. This is in reference to the fact that Aaron Rodgers, I believe, it was like faking his COVID-19 vaccination status for a while to like report to training camp so he could play. So, you know, Don's a good guy, but he's only a good guy when the public opinion is something that he can parrot, you know? When he actually has to put a stance out on his own or actually act on his own moral compass and not what people on Twitter tell him to do, he's the exact person that he wants to criticize. He's the exact fucking person that he hates. He's the idiots that he proclaims as everyone else, right? Also, he can sell some more books, man. That's what it really comes down to, and get more fucking followers and feed his ego more. Feed that checkmark ego a little bit more, right, Don? Now, Don is not the only one who has been exposed as a hypocrite throughout this entire thing, okay? Joe Rogan himself, actually, there was a clip that surfaced of him about 2 years ago in which he, vehemently supported vaccinations. He was all for it, man. He was all for vaccines, and now all of a sudden, you know, it's not about trusting the doctors and scientists as much. He wants to be a little bit more questionable, which I don't think is something deserving of the death penalty, but there are people on his show that have said irresponsible things, that have said things that I disagree with, and a lot of people would disagree with. I don't think that's the end of the world. I don't think that means he deserves to literally lose it all, but I just kind of want to go through the entire, I guess, reaction that the public has kind of had to this entire thing, because it really kind of highlights a lot of hypocrisies in a lot of different ways for a lot of different people. So one of the big sparks to this entire thing, right, was Neil Young, okay? I don't know if you guys heard about this. I was going to make a video on this when it happened, but I never did because, well, the situation kind of faded away after Spotify just told him to go fuck himself, basically. So Neil Young basically said that he wanted his music removed from Spotify unless they removed Joe Rogan due to his COVID-19 misinformation and the statements that were being made on his show. Keep in mind, Neil Young is famous for songs that include the 1989 song Rockin' in the Free World, where he was patriotic and was all about the free world, but now, you know, he's all about basically telling private companies what they can and can't do with other people's content because he doesn't agree with it. Nothing says free world more than that, right? But what really gets me about the whole Neil Young thing is, you know, he was making this big moral grandstand about this misinformation on Spotify. Take my music the fuck off your platform if you're not removing it. He then turned around immediately and endorsed Amazon Music, which, if you know anything about the Amazon parent company, it has been considered one of the most morally bankrupt and probably should be also considered one of the most criminal global conglomerate enterprises that we've seen in our lifetimes. Amazon is known for being union busters. They actually promote actual propaganda inside of the Amazon company that like psychologically is supposed to manipulate workers into not seeking unions so they can't basically fight for better treatment and better wages from this company that continues to set all kinds of crazy fucking profits. There's been countless stories of like Amazon workers collapsing in fulfillment centers because specific fulfillment centers have actual quotas that employees have to meet that are so unrealistic that employees would work themselves to exhaustion to avoid being fired. There's been stories of Amazon drivers not being able to or not being allowed to take bathroom breaks, so they've been forced to literally piss in bottles inside of their trucks between stops in order to literally use the fucking bathroom, which is an inherent human need. Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, is literally one of the most hated people on the planet and is considered one of the greediest fucking people on the planet, but nothing says rockin' in the free world like supporting a company like that, man, that actively abuses workers' rights and tries to oppress the people who work for the company, right? But as long as you can draw the line at misinformation on COVID-19, right, you can still morally grandstand. And it's even gotten to the point that literal political propaganda is being spread about this situation, which personally I think is actually fucking insane. It doesn't surprise me whatsoever. I mean, you know, masks, the mandates, the vaccines, pretty much all of the science around COVID, at least here in the United States, has become so hyper-politicized that any take that you have is going to be deemed the wrong take. Like, I already know that there's going to probably be a lot of people disliking this video and being mad at me because I'm not anti-vax. Because I believe in vaccines, and I believe that people should be vaccinated. I've always believed in vaccines. I've never had an issue with them, even before COVID, so... But that's going to be a take that upsets some people, even though I don't think that, you know, people who fucking don't get the vaccine should be shot on sight or anything like that, right? So there's a page called Occupy Democrats. I think you can tell literally by the name of that what exactly it is. Here in America, the left and the right wing both have their social media accounts that they use to kind of like gimmick and bait people on their political sides into being upset about topics so that they can build like rage bait essentially, and then they can use that during the next election cycle, which conveniently is actually this year with the midterm elections, where right now it's pretty much expected that Democrats are about to get completely fucking wiped by the Republicans because most of the Biden administration's promises have been complete failures or abandoned at this point. So breaking, industry insiders reveal that Michelle and Barack Obama are considering removing their shows from Spotify amid the outcry over Joe Rogan's COVID disinformation and their own frustrations with the streaming platform. Retweet if you think that the Obamas should dump Spotify. Well, you got 4,500 likes or so congratulations, guys. It worked. This is textbook social media propaganda, okay? They take a historically popular Democratic president, okay? Obama has been historically looked upon very favorably by historians and whatnot. They point out that they're the latest ones considering pulling out of Spotify, right? Because of all of this disinformation and whatnot going around, right? Retweet if you think they should dump Spotify, man. You know, this is the right opinion. If you think the Obama should dump Spotify, retweet our propaganda. You're not a real Democrat if you don't think the Obamas should dump Spotify, and you wouldn't want to be anything but a Democrat, right? So I decided to delve, I guess, into this subject and figure out a little bit more for myself, right? Because the idea that the Obamas, who I didn't even know had their own show on Spotify, to be completely frank with you, were considering pulling their show from Spotify over this, it kind of surprised me, to be honest. And it turns out that Michelle and Barack Obama signed a 3-year deal with Spotify back in 2019. When you do the basic math, 3 years later is 2022, which is the year that we're living in. Meaning that their contract for exclusivity or whatever with Spotify is about to end within the next few months. So this is the perfect time for anyone who has any business sense to do what anyone with any business sense would do and shop your product around and see what the best offer is. So what's actually happening here is the Obamas realize, hey, our deal's about up, you know? What are we gonna do here? So they're looking for the best potential offer from pretty much anywhere because their deal's almost up, and it's being almost like misguided as, oh, we're upset about the COVID disinformation. They found a convenient excuse, and people supporting them found a convenient excuse. The Obamas are not doing this over COVID disinformation. They're doing this because there's money in their fucking podcast. They can find money pretty much on any platform because of who they are, and they might be able to get a big check from, you know, iTunes or whoever else, right? To be fair, why would you sign another 3-year deal with Spotify and get $1 million when you can sign a 3-year deal with iTunes and get $10 million? That's what's happening, but of course it's being painted as they really care about this disinformation. It's nothing about that. They don't give a shit about that. You really think they care? You think they care about that more than they care about the next contract they're getting? Really? Come on now, let's get real here. And it's ironic that they're even trying to use the Obamas as like these moral beacons of hope. These people are, you know, they really care about humanity. They would be willing to take their show down for COVID disinformation, right? Does anyone remember the fact that Obama, during his presidency, dropped 10 more airstrikes, I think within the first year of his presidency alone, on the Middle East and in third world countries than Bush did in his entire presidency? Obama has been credited with killing hundreds of civilians in third world countries through airstrikes at his discretion, at his disposal. with the tools of the US military industrial complex, killed children, mothers, fathers, family members, destroyed homes and lives, destroyed buildings and schools and all these other things, right? But because he's taking his fucking platform off of Spotify because his contract's about to end, he's a moral beacon of hope. I didn't hate Obama during his presidency like a lot of people did. I don't know if that's controversial to say, but can we please stop pretending like the people who fucking kill innocent people across the world 3,000 miles away are great people because, you know, they disagree with Joe Rogan? Like, come on, man. It literally can't get any worse than this, bro. Like, it's literal political propaganda. They're literally trying to pin people by their beliefs on, or their stances on this entire thing, and they're trying to divide them into their political parties. And to be honest with you, and to be fair, Republicans do this all the time too. Republicans rage bait all the time too. A lot of that's what's got this whole situation started in the first place. But this isn't a situation that needs to involve political propaganda. If you disagree with Joe Rogan or you think that he's a piece of shit, what does you being Democrat have to do with anything? Why do you have to follow a Democratic political outlet page in order for that to be the case? Why do you have to retweet them in order for you to be the good guy? It's because there's an ulterior motive, okay? For a lot of these people. I'm not saying everyone who's mad about this situation has an ulterior motive. From what I've seen, there are genuinely some people who are now for the first time discovering some of these comments that he's made, and they're upset about them, okay? And you have the right to be upset about these things and speak out about them, sure. But Don Winslow and all these other people had just shown themselves to be fucking hypocrites. You know, they don't care. In Don's instance, I don't know if he was covering up for the fact that he's done shit like this and someone else was getting canceled for it and getting called out for it, and he wanted to kind of project like he would never be the kind of guy to do something like that. Look at me, guys, I'm not racist. I would never do that. Or if he was just simply trying to get his name out there for more engagements and basically to farm impressions so he can try to sell more books to more people. But I have a hard time actually believing that this guy stands on anything that he has to say. I have a hard time believing that any of his, outrage about this situation is actually legitimate in any way, shape, or form, considering he's been fucking sliced to pieces with the hypocrisy that he's shown. I don't believe that Occupy Democrats really cares about Obama dumping Spotify because of COVID misinformation. I more or less believe that they're simply doing this and jumping on the trend of talking about this so they can farm impressions and they can try to turn as many unregistered or, I guess, middle gap voters as they can into Democrats so that they can fuel their political ideologies and try to help win more elections for the Democrats. I believe that Neil Young basically just stood up and said this, and I don't know his full intention behind it, but he showed to be kind of a hypocrite when you draw the line at COVID misinformation, but you'll throw your full support and endorsement behind a company that's been accused of some pretty crazy shit like that. At the end of the day, I don't really think that we're going to see, I guess, the Joe Rogan experience kicked off with Spotify, right? Like the CEO has kind of like quadrupled down at this point on having the podcast. They paid $100 million for it. So they obviously see inherent value in it. Obviously it's getting, 11 million daily listeners. That's a lot of people. There's the financial incentive to keep it around. But what has happened recently is a lot of the episodes of the, back catalog of this show have been disappearing. At this point, I think like 70 plus episodes in just like the last few days have been scrubbed from Spotify and are basically completely inaccessible at this point unless you can find them somewhere else. I don't personally agree with that. I don't think that that's the right take. I don't think that's the right move. I think that people in society should be more open to the idea of hearing something that they disagree with or don't like, and not immediately calling for that person's platform to be completely fucking taken away from them. I understand the concern about some things with the show and some things said by some of the guests and whatever, but at the end of the day, I think that's a pretty major reason why people listen to Joe Rogan, is the fact that he is willing to have people from different backgrounds on the same show. I mean, he'll have Ben Shapiro on the same show as Bernie Sanders. He doesn't really, I would say, show too much bias when it comes to like what political parties he endorses by having them on the show exclusively. Like a lot of shows, man, if they had like, let's say a left wing lean to them, right? They would have like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez or like Bernie Sanders or Ilhan Omar, people like this, right? But you most likely would never see them interview, Donald Trump or like Matt Gaetz or Ted Cruz or somebody like that, right? And same thing in the opposite direction, right? Like a lot of these right-wing podcasts or like, websites, they would welcome people on the right with open arms, but they wouldn't, or at least they'd be a little bit more hesitant, I feel like, to show people the opinions from people on the left directly. I think what would be really nice at this point, honestly, to help kind of clear a lot of this up, at least with the misinformation and whatnot, is to have established like CDC officials or somebody come on to the podcast and talk to Joe Rogan directly. Like the US Surgeon General said that something needed to be done about the podcast. I'm not a fan of, people in the government basically saying what can and can't be heard. I feel like that's a little extreme, but I mean, if there's such an issue with this misinformation and all these things, who loses if the Surgeon General goes on the show and speaks the case and pleads the case of the science and, the pro-vaccine stance and things like that? You get that message out there to tens of millions of people who otherwise might not hear that message according to what you're saying. Joe Rogan himself hears that message directly from you, which I would think would make it less likely for him to slip up in the future and say things that are deemed misinformation. The audience doesn't lose because they get to hear somebody actually try to explain the other side to them in a way that actually makes sense. At least that's the goal of something like that. No one loses, the Surgeon General doesn't lose, the population that watches the videos doesn't lose, Joe Rogan doesn't lose, the people mad about misinformation don't lose. I think that would really clear a lot of things up. I'm pretty sure that's not going to happen at this point, but that's kind of just my take on this entire thing, honestly. I know that this whole thing has been a very heated debate at this point. A lot of people are angry about this. There's people on both sides of this that are just so goddamn mad. People on the left think he's a racist and he fucking hates vaccines and he doesn't believe in COVID treatments and actual science. People on the right are seeing this as, woke leftists coming for the right again and, they're taking away everyone's freedom of speech, man. If Joe Rogan can't say it, you can't say it next either. And it's been kind of turned into something like that, when in reality, I feel like there's a lot of explanations that solve a lot of issues behind this. Joe Rogan himself has apologized directly to the public, I believe through Instagram, if I'm not mistaken, about this entire subject. Once again, I don't really see his podcast disappearing anytime soon. But with that being said, man, thank you guys for watching. If you did enjoy, make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're brand new around here on the channel, follow me over on Twitter and Twitch at @SubToOptimus. Make sure to check out Shop Opti down below. And until my next video, guys, this is Optimus, talking about the Joe Rogan situation and signing out.